Well, throughout September, we have been marking Heritage Month, but here's a different take. Ming-Cheau Lin arrived in South Africa from Taiwan when she was just 3 years old. She often felt like an outsider, either too Asian, not Asian enough, and not South African. Ming-Cheau Lin is here to talk about her new book called Yellow and Confused. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming in. We just played a story about a new play at the Market Theatre about Sarah Baartman, who I think, if we talk about the subject of this book, Heritage Month, and look at her story, we talk about the issue of othering.
Yes.
And that I found, even though I didn't get to read all of it yet, I've been trying to get through as much of it as possible. One of the first passages that really struck me on page 38 of your book, and I just want to read that very quickly. You say, filling out government or work forms where the only tick boxes available are African, coloured, Indian and white, we're told to tick the coloured box, or we are included as another category. Other, literal othering. We're not made to feel included in this delusion of a rainbow nation. And a delusion we hear a lot, a delusion of a rainbow nation, that it's a snappy word that we clung to during difficult times of transition. Yes. But have we horribly failed to make that a reality? And therefore an issue of othering is at the center of so many news stories that we are trying to come to terms with. Did this book help you come to terms with that issue?
Well, the book is more of a compilation of my unlearning and my relearning of things to understand my identity and the role that I play in South Africa. And I think it's very important to actually go back into the kind of historical moments and stuff and understand the context of why things happen and the way that they happened so that we can understand why. And once we know why, we can progress by unlearning all the biases and prejudices that we held from before. And I just feel that this book, what it's done for me is it's been able to put together the majority of my unlearning up to this date, and be able to contextualize it and also to provide references, historical context of where things come from, but in a very conversational format.
Indeed, and I think it's quite refreshing that it comes from your experience in this generation as an immigrant to South Africa. You also spoke quite a bit about how angry so much of what you experience in terms of finding your identity made you feel, and that you felt like you were angry from the time when people would start saying your name in a funny way or asking you, where do you really come from? Was it liberating to at least even admit that this made me angry because I'm South African?
I think that being able to acknowledge my anger and to understand that it's validated anger, I think that was the biggest thing for me, because throughout my life it's always been, I knew I was angry, and I knew I was angry at injustices, when things are unfair or things don't happen as they should. And for me, the problem lay basically in not understanding kind of situation. And now as an adult and being able to unlearn, having the privilege to be able to unlearn and being granted spaces where I'm embraced by fellow friends to be able to unlearn, I feel that all of that has contributed so much to understanding my anger and also being validated and understanding that, you know what, it's okay to be angry, especially when things are not right.
And you also say that your experiences have made you be able to have more empathy for other people who perhaps find themselves a minority or who come from mixed backgrounds, who have an immigration background, as it were. Have you found that people have been surprised when you take their hand and say, I totally understand where you're coming from?
I do, actually. And then, honestly, I have to give it to Black Twitter. I felt so included in that kind of space when they see that you are an ally, that you are willing not to only fight for your battles, but that you're standing with others to fight in their battle as well. They see this in you, and to be able to be acknowledged and also to be embraced like that, I feel so privileged to be in these kind of spaces. But props to Black women, I have
Absolutely.
to say.
Yeah. Now you have a fantastic background in that you arrived when you were 3 years old from Taiwan with your family, and you ended up in Bloemfontein.
Yes.
Of all places. Where those kinds of questions about the way you look, the color of your skin, you speak. I mean, the title of your book is Yellow and Confused. Do you find that you grew up in the 90s? Do you find that a place like Bloemfontein, which you still now would say that's home, I'm sure, even though you live elsewhere with your own little family, do you think we've come a little further along that road? That other kids that arrive with your kind of background don't have to face that?
I don't think so. And that's because as I was growing up, I've never had a reference like this to understand myself, my identity, my anger, my personality even. And I speak about a concept called the third culture kid, which is basically your foundation, your cultural foundation doesn't mirror what's outside around you. And for me, many of us, especially the diaspora Asians, we struggle to understand our own identities. Like you said, not Asian enough or too Asian in the different spaces that we're in. And I think that just to be able to contextualize it as we kind of our own subculture, and that it's okay to not be too much of either, and or even to not be a certain way completely at all. We are all individuals. We are all unique people. Therefore, we also need to understand that it's okay to be who we are and not be so hard on ourselves.
Why do you think we're not getting closer to this? I mean, some of what I read in the first part of your book reminded me of an experience I had going home to my town in the Cape. And I was in a little town, you know, gentrification takes place and you've got fancy places now to go to in your old hometown. And you're going there with your sister and the woman behind the counter says, "Oh, where are you from?" And my sister and I said, we're from here.
Yeah.
And then she says, "Oh, no, but where are you really from?" And so I said, well, my great-great-grandmother was a freed slave called Sarah van Bali. How much further do you want me to go?
Yeah.
At what point do we realize that we are South Africans and our roots run deep and that not one is seen better than or more authentic than?
Exactly. I think we come how do you say, it's hard to really understand, to contextualize like only one reason being the reason that we're lacking in terms of this progression. But for me, I focus a lot of my work in terms of representation and the lack of representation in media. My background is in advertising. I'm a copywriter, and I worked in an agency for 7 years. I was either the only person of color on my creative team or the only woman of color. And for a country where the majority is black, this speaks a lot to...
In 2019.
In 2019. This speaks a lot to the kind of representation that's on the top level, the kind that makes decisions, that gives the call to say, yes, this campaign will work. But it starts from the bottom. Your creatives need to be just as aware as your top executives are, because if you pitch an idea that's problematic, that's actually kind of racist.
And it makes business sense if you get the right people in the room to make those decisions for you.
Hire consults.
Absolutely.
Pay people to use their real experiences, because they're actually from those backgrounds, to help you make sure that your campaign is not problematic.
Well, the book is called Yellow and Confused, Ming-Cheau Lin, her second book. Her first one, a very popular cookbook, go onto her Instagram, and her food blog, an award-winning food blogger as well, where she expresses herself through her food, the food she grew up with, and the twists that she's added to it. What a pleasure to have you here. I can't wait to spend the weekend finishing this.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your time. And the book launch happening tonight in Johannesburg at
Bridge Books on CBD.
Bridge Books in Commissioner Street, as it were. Thank you so much. We wish you everything of the best.